Welcome back to our news bulletin. In the UK, the death toll has exceeded 32,000 with 210 new fatalities, while the number of coronavirus cases in the 6 Gulf Arab states surpassed 100,000 with 557 deaths. This report has details.
UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has revealed his plan for exiting the coronavirus lockdown as the country sees a slight fall in number of daily deaths. The plan allows some people back to work but urged everyone to wear face coverings in enclosed spaces. The government says it would introduce a 14-day quarantine on international travelers with some exceptions. In the Gulf, Saudi Arabia has the highest count at over 41,000 infections and 255 deaths. The country has recorded 1,966 new cases and 9 new deaths over the past 24 hours. The UAE has so far reported a total of over 18,000 infections with 198 deaths. Meanwhile, China has put Shulan city in the northeastern Jilin province under lockdown after it reports 9 new cases. State media said all non-essential transportation is banned, while residential compounds and villages are closed. The global COVID-19 death count has crossed 282,000 with over 4.1 million infections.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported nearly 1,500 coronavirus cases in the last 24 hours, which took the total number of infections to some 31,000. The Health Ministry says 28 more patients have died, while the death toll stands at 667. The ministry said almost 11,400 tests have been conducted since yesterday. It said more than 8,200 coronavirus patients have recovered across the country. The ministry said the province of Punjab has reported the most cases at 11,568. Meanwhile, the 6th consignment of goods containing 17 tons of medical supplies has arrived in Pakistan from China. Officials said the equipment includes 24 X-ray machines and their parts, 371,000 VTMs for testing, and over 1 million masks. China has once again condemned the US for its statements regarding the origin of the novel coronavirus. In a press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told lies after lies in his attacks on China. He said US politicians should stop using tricks to cheat people. The spokesperson said experts believe COVID-19 originated in nature and was transmitted from animals to people. Tensions between Washington and Beijing have increased in recent months as the novel coronavirus has swept across the globe. Now, the number of recoveries from the coronavirus outbreak has exceeded 1.4 million worldwide. The highest number was registered in the US with over 200,000, while it also remains the hardest hit country. Germany follows the US with more than 144,000 recoveries, Spain with 136,000 and Italy with over 105,000. Turkey also entered the world's top 5 countries in terms of COVID-19 recoveries, with nearly 92,700 people beating the disease. Meanwhile, scientists have found evidence for mutations in some strains of COVID-19 that suggest the pathogen may be adapting to humans. The analysis shows 2 genetic changes that alter the critical spike protein the virus uses to infect human cells. In another news, 22 Afghan soldiers have been killed in a Taliban attack in eastern Laghman province. The provincial officials said dozens of vehicles of security forces were damaged in the attack. In a statement, the Afghan Defense Ministry said the attack was pushed back by the Afghan forces in Ali Shing district of the province. Claiming the responsibility, the Taliban said 24 soldiers were killed and 30 others wounded in ambush on security checkpoint. Spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said 13 armored personnel carriers were destroyed in the attack. Meanwhile, the Taliban said they have released 53 more government prisoners in Badghis and Faryab provinces. The group said each prisoner was given clothes and travel compensation. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's intelligence agency National Directorate of Security has alleged that the Taliban still maintain close ties with terrorist groups. Agency head Ahmad Zia Siraj said this relationship violates the Doha deal. During a briefing, Siraj claimed the Taliban leadership is still thinking of a comeback to power by military means. The intelligence chief said the fighters do not value things like mutual tolerance and peace. Meanwhile, Afghan Minister of Interior Masood Andrabi said the Taliban will not be able to win on the battlefield. The European Union says it is ready to take legal action against Israel's illegal annexation of the West Bank. Foreign policy spokesperson Peter Stanos warned Tel Aviv that if it goes ahead with the annexation, the EU will act accordingly. Stanos confirmed that the EU foreign ministers will discuss the topic at a video conference meeting on Friday, but he said that it is early to speculate on whether the EU would impose sanctions or revise its partnership with Israel. Earlier, Palestine's Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh called for international recognition of the Palestinian state. At a press conference, he said a strong position by the Arab world, Africa and Europe will be sufficient to rein in Israel. Israel is expected to carry out the annexation on 1st July, as agreed between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz. An Iranian Navy officer has been killed and several others wounded in an incident on a military ship during a naval exercise in the Gulf of Oman. The Gulf of Oman connects to the Strait of Hormuz, through which about a fifth of the world's oil passes. The Iranian state media said the incident took place aboard the Konarak support ship. It is a domestically made missile-launching warship which joined the naval fleet in 2018. It said another ship accidentally fired a missile onto the Konarak during a live-fire exercise. The state media said the incident is being probed. Moving on, the Indian Supreme Court has refrained from passing any decisive orders on the restoration of 4G internet in occupied Kashmir. The Indian government has suspended high-speed internet services in the occupied valley for the last 281 days. The ROPCO directed Delhi to constitute a special committee to examine the contentions raised by the petitioners. In its verdict, the three-member bench said the court has to ensure national security and human rights are balanced. Criticizing the verdict, Indian lawyers accused the bench of abdication of judicial responsibility. They said the verdict says the executive will decide whether the executive violated fundamental rights. In Niger, 20 people have been killed in attacks by unidentified gunmen on several villages in Talibari region. The regional governor told media that the assailants looted shops, stole cattle, and ordered village inhabitants to flee. Since 2017, a state of emergency has been in place in Talibari, which borders Mali, Burkina Faso, and Benin. Militants affiliated to the ISIS and Al-Qaeda continue to operate in the region, weakening control by national governments. Attacks by these groups have killed 170 government soldiers since December last year. Last week, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that militant groups in the Sahel were exploiting the coronavirus pandemic to step up attacks. Meanwhile, in Mali, 3 UN peacekeepers have been killed and 4 others wounded after their convoy hit a roadside bomb. In a statement, the UN mission chief in Mali said the peacekeepers were on a routine patrol during the incident in a Gulhik commune. The UN mission said it will make every effort to identify and apprehend those responsible for these terrorist acts. UN Chief Antonio Guterres condemned the attack, saying the perpetrators must be brought to justice. The UN mission has 13,000 troops from several nations deployed across the vast semi-arid country. Mali is struggling to contain a militant insurgency that erupted in 2012, which has claimed thousands of military and civilian lives. Iraq's judiciary has ordered courts to release anti-government protesters. Supreme Judiciary Council said the move is in line with a call by Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi to release the prisoners. The council reiterated that the right to protest is guaranteed by the Constitution, provided that it does not violate the law. Anti-government rallies have resumed in several cities, clashing with security forces and ending months of relative calm. A medical official said that around 20 protesters suffered breathing difficulties from tear gas, but no shots were fired. More than 550 people have been killed since the protests began against corruption and overhaul of ruling class in Iraq. The World Health Organization and the International Organization for Migration have called on Yemen to continue to accept migrants. This follows concerns of rising discrimination towards migrants in the country after they are being referred to as coronavirus transmitters. In a statement, WHO said the virus respects no borders and targets everyone, regardless of race, political affiliation, or geographical location. IOM said migrants should not be stigmatized or associated with the risk of importing diseases. It said barriers to health services, poor living and working conditions on the route from Africa to the Arabian Gulf are the ones that pose serious health risks. The WHO and IOM have ensured the inclusion of migrants in the public health response led by the Yemeni authorities. Wuhan, the epicenter of the new coronavirus outbreak in China, has reported its first cluster of infections since lockdown in the city was lifted a month ago. Wuhan reported 5 new confirmed cases in the same residential compound. In a statement, the health authority said the task of epidemic prevention and control in the city is still very heavy. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported a spike of 69 new infections, most of which are connected with an outbreak at several bars and nightclubs in Seoul. Officials say they have tested 4,000 people so far, but the authorities are still trying to track down 3,000 more who were at the venues. We're taking a short break now, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. Japan says it has postponed its joint fighter aircraft exercise with India. In a statement, the Japanese Defense Ministry said it would have been the first fighter aircraft training jointly held by both the countries. It said two sides agreed to promote defense cooperation and exchanges to uphold and reinforce a free and open Indo-Pacific. The development comes a day after the Indian and Chinese troops had a brief skirmish in Sikkim. The Indian Defense Ministry said some troops were injured in the incident. It said the two sides disengaged after dialogue and interaction at the local level. In Mexico, the remains of 25 people have been found buried in a mass grave outside the western city of Guadalajara. The Jalisco state prosecutor said the remains have been transferred to a local morgue for further examination. Locals had dogs uncovered the bones at an abandoned farm in the town of El Salto, south of Guadalajara. So far this year, 115 bodies have been found in at least 10 clandestine graves in Jalisco, most of them outside Guadalajara. The state has been the scene of rising violence during the first 5 years linked to a powerful drug cartel, Jalisco Nueva Generación. In Uganda, 15 workers have died as an under-construction building collapsed on the outskirts of the country's capital, Kampala. Local council chairman said 40 people were working on the building, but 20 of them spent nights at the sites due to the COVID-19 curfew. The chairman said those who sleep at the construction site have perished. Preliminary investigations indicate that substandard materials were being used in the construction of the 4-story building. Poland's top electoral body has given the parliament speaker 14 days to set a new date for presidential elections. In a resolution, the State Electoral Commission said the election must be held within 60 days of this announcement or by late July. The State Electoral Commission chief said postponement of Sunday's vote can be blamed on coronavirus and the legislative process. It was the first time in almost 31 years of Polish democracy that voter turnout clocked in at zero and election was declared null and void. Poland found itself in a bizarre predicament in which presidential ballot was neither formally postponed nor cancelled. The situation arose after the government and opposition failed to agree on a constitutional solution to hold an election during the COVID-19 crisis. In China, the Shanghai Disneyland theme park has reopened to visitors with controlled capacity after the COVID-19 pandemic became more passive. After a brief opening ceremony, the park became the first Disney's park to officially reopen for business in the world. Parks authorities say they have adopted strict prevention and control measures, including limiting the number of visitors to 30% of its normal capacity. They said visitors need to wear masks, pass temperature checks, and show their health certificates to enter the Wonderland. Senior Vice President of the Shanghai Disney Resort, Andrew Bulletin, said more frequent disinfection is being carried out at the park.
We've also enhanced our cleaning and sanitization throughout the park, so we have many more cast members out wiping down surfaces, high touch, medium touch, low touch objects to make sure again that we are providing that safe environment for our guests. In addition, we've added over 300 hand sanitizers throughout the park at the exits of attractions, inside shops and restaurants to make sure that our guests have that ability to continue to keep their hands clean, which is one of the major means of preventing transmission.
In Gaza, the coronavirus outbreak has created economic difficulties for the locals in the already impoverished territory, which is home to 2 million people. This report will tell the plights of Gazans.
As coronavirus restrictions make the lives of millions of people across the world, this year's Ramadan is not like any other for small businessmen in Gaza. The holy month of Ramadan normally means a surge in sales for traders and shop owners in Gaza. However, this year few people are visiting markets out of fear of the virus and the economic situation. Vendors are facing challenges as the Gazans are suffering from an economic crisis in the blockaded coastal territory. Hassan Al-Masr, who sells traditional desserts called Ramadan Katefi, says the vendors have been affected by the worsening coronavirus crisis.
Both the Israeli blockade and the worsening of the economic situation due to the epidemic hit our sales in Ramadan. There is no trade. This situation affected us very much.
Traders in the famous Fahmi Pasha street of Gaza are disappointed as well. Muhammad Al-Katani, who sells toys and lanterns, is trying hard, calling out to customers with motivational phrases that push them to buy.
We used to sell very well in the past Ramadan, but this year we don't. Because of the epidemic and fear of the future, people only buy their basic needs.
According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, the number of people infected by COVID-19 in the West Bank and Gaza has reached 520.
In Germany, after a 2-month lockdown, mosques have reopened following some guidelines set out by the Germany Muslim Council. Muslims are also delivering food to the needy in different parts of the country. Further details in this report.
The German government has decided to lift a number of coronavirus lockdown measures. Authorities have also allowed prayer services at mosques, churches, and synagogues. Faithful Muslims offer their prayers wearing masks while also maintaining social distancing. Afterwards, the house of worship is disinfected by the administration.
Of course, it is still a great happiness under these conditions. I hope we will pray again in our own way as soon as possible.
Germany's mosques have been closed for the past 2 months as part of coronavirus containment measures.
After a long time, we miss performing morning prayers with the community and performing prayers together. It is a little difficult under these conditions, but thank God.
Like every Ramadan, charitable Muslims are offering iftar meals to the needy.
The original idea was that after Wuppertal's food banks closed and they received no more donations, we thought we could help by taking the Ramadan iftar to people's homes. The original plan was 1,000 meals, but the food banks, thank God, opened again. We decided to stick to our idea, though even if it's a few meals less, and in the end, we planned for 300.
The German government has urged people to stay disciplined as coronavirus restrictions have been eased. Some schools, parks, bookshops, fashion stores and other shops smaller than 800 square meters have been given permission to reopen.
We will be right back after a short break. Stay tuned. top business story. The UK and the EU will resume the third round of post-Brexit trade talks today, ahead of a decisive summit next month. The latest round of talks will be held via video conference, which will end on Friday. London and Brussels are due to decide on extending the current deadline for negotiating an agreement beyond 31st December. The two sides continue to struggle to reach an agreement on a wide range of areas. After negotiations this week, a fourth round of talks is scheduled to begin on next month. Under the withdrawal agreement, both sides have until 31st December to ratify the trade deal and rules for future cooperation. Saudi Arabia says it will triple its value-added tax and halt monthly handout payments to citizens in new austerity measures. The announcement comes as Riyadh struggles with double economic shock of COVID-19 pandemic and record oil price slump. Finance Minister Mohammed Al-Jadaan said the cost of living allowance will be halted from June, while VAT will be raised from 5% to 15% from July 1st. Jadaan said Riyadh is expected to lose half of its oil income, which contributes about 70% of public revenues. He said Riyadh will borrow close to $60 billion this year to plug a huge budget deficit. The kingdom posted a $9 billion budget deficit in the first quarter of this year. Japan says it will take more emergency stimulus measures to combat the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. In a speech at a parliamentary session, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says Tokyo is ready to compile a second supplementary budget. Abe said the government will consider additional steps such as aid to firms struggling to pay rent, support for students. He said more subsidies will also be given to companies hit by slumping sales. Abe declined to reveal the size of spending and said the decision will depend on how many states can lift emergency measures. But the opposition said government should deploy fresh spending of $936 billion funded by a 100-year coronavirus bond. Japan compiled a record over $1 trillion economic stimulus package in April, focused on cash payouts to households and loans to small businesses. Colombia's national airline AVIANCA has filed for bankruptcy protection in a U.S. court. The passenger operations of Latin America's second-largest airline have been grounded since March because of coronavirus outbreak. In a statement, the firm said it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in a court in New York. The process postpones the U.S. company's obligations to its creditors, giving it time to reorganize its debts or sell parts of the business. Chief Executive Anko van der Werf said the pandemic has cut more than 80% of its income and it is struggling with high fixed costs.
AVIANCA is facing the most unprecedented event in its 100-year history. Given the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, global passenger traffic is coming in at under more than 90%, and it is predicted that the global aero traffic sector will see a revenue fall about $314 billion, according to the IATA.
Y concluimos que
If AVIANCA fails to come out of bankruptcy, this will make it the first major airline to go under amid the pandemic. Now, let's look at the U.S. stocks, which are trading lower over worried about a second wave of coronavirus infections. At the start of the trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average shed about 0.75%. The S&P 500 is also trading lower by about 0.5%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index is trading fractionally higher. Meanwhile, oil prices jumped after Saudi Arabia said it will cut production further in an effort to support global oil markets. Kuwait has also joined Riyadh in announcing fresh oil production cuts to be implemented in June. Kuwait is likely to slash production by 80,000 barrels per day in June. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.